Hello. Welcome to my channel where I talk about things that I find interesting, and I hope you do too. So, today we're going to talk about meaningful experience and what it means to have a meaningful experience. And it's very fascinating because I think the key to having meaningful experience is balance. I think a lot of people try to live in that kind of like, oh, well, yes, balance is key, but I don't think they actually live that out or know what that means. Because oftentimes we try to balance subjective experience with objective reality, when in reality it's balancing subjective experience in relation to the unmovable winds of objective reality. Okay. And it's similar in other aspects of our lives to where we can actually balance two aspects of our own subjective experience, because oftentimes we have the overarching picture, and then we have lower resolution ideas and things we have to understand for ourselves and pursue. And here's the thing, I talked in the last video about analytical imagination, to where you need to understand how to extrapolate and innovate, and as well as analyze and simplify to get to the most parsimonious answer. So, meaningful experience. That is something that is very unique to conscious creatures. Okay. And it's hard to say what it means to a monkey or different other mammals to have a meaningful experience. I don't know. So I can only talk in relation to the human experience because I haven't really done any research on kind of animal psychology, which I think is fascinating. If you're into that, please let me know in the comments what you think about meaningful experiences for different creatures, because I think that's awesome. That's a pretty cool idea. But when it comes to humans, meaningful experience is, I think, characterized by genuine expression. And oftentimes, we take things in from the external world and we don't process them internally to where they will affect our fundamental values. I think that, so in our ventromedial prefrontal cortex, we have that is what holds and processes our fundamental values. Okay. And then we have the temporal parietal junction, which changes our perspective. And there is a very nice, intricate relationship between these two brain parts, to where once your fundamental values shift, your perspective shifts. And what happens is a new revelation, a new insight into what your experience can hold, and different new paths you can take. And those paths are what's going to fulfill that kind of meaningful experience in your life, is exploring those paths and having a level of deep curiosity like we do when we're children. It's tapping into that childlike wonder. And I think a lot of people often confuse a divine nature with childlike wonder. And I think that's why, I think Jesus said to be like children, because I think he realized what that meant, and how being childlike is tapping into that innate curiosity. And in my mind, being curious, genuine curiosity, is to be worthy of salvation. It's a proclamation of creation, which in turns creates the most meaningful version of yourself. And I think what happens is that we get confused because there are a lot of external things that we haven't yet internally processed. And since we are kind of living in a life that is dishonest and controlled by hedonistic desires, we don't go through the process of pushing through to the other side where meaningful experience lies. And all it really is just refining and understanding what it means to pursue greater things than yourself. And that's a hard thing to do, man. It's a hard thing to do. But it's what we need to do, and it's what we're made to do, even from an evolutionary standpoint. It is the goal for us to pursue something greater than us. I mean, it's literally the biological orientation towards goals that characterizes successful integrations of environment. And what that leads to is, you can think of the biological evolutionary process happening here, and then the goals are over here, and where we are is right here. It seems that there's an underlying substrate connecting those two, and in our orientation towards those goals, we progress towards those meaningful determinants, which are characterized by successful integrations of environment. Okay? And that is the process in which we create meaningful experience. You have to realize that, let's say there really is no God, exactly. It's hard to say because there does seem to be a mind that characterizes conscious experience. And I guess it's similar to the will, like what Schopenhauer talks about, but it's not exactly that. I haven't read any of his stuff, so I'm not exactly sure what he's saying. But what I'm saying is that there seems to be a deep underlying connecting substrate for mental experience, and that these fields exist. And I know that's a very idealist worldview, but it seems to be correct. It characterizes something that exists that I think a lot of materialists want to just disregard as an illusion, which is not a sufficient answer, by the way. There is something more, and that more is characterized by meaningful experience or altered states of consciousness. And I could get into altered state of consciousness, like when you take psychedelics. It's an altered state of consciousness. I'm not exactly sure what it means to be in a psychedelic trip and having that altered state of mind because I'm not very proficient in my understanding of psychedelics. I don't really understand them at all, but what I do understand is what it means to have a meaningful experience, and I think that can be completely sober, by the way. I think it's probably better for that to be sober. And I think the conditions of tapping into that divine nature of meaningful experience comes from a change in fundamental values which shift your perspective to create meaningful experience. And I know I'm kind of just like circling back and back and I'm kind of just talking about the same things, but I think you have to understand the limits of perception, manifestation, rationalization, conceptualization, and innovation all in one. And you know, take all those and consider ideas that you find to express something more. That's what it is. It's something more than what you have. That is what's going to characterize your not divine, but meaningful experience. Like, it's so important to live a meaningful life. And here's the thing, your meaningful experience doesn't have to look like anybody else's, it can look just like yours. We are individuals. The likelihood of someone being born exactly like you is insanely improbable and probably hasn't happened. Even if their genetic code is the exact same, they haven't lived the experiences you have. You are a complete unique characterization of a fundamental manifestation derived from evolution. That is pretty incredible. And I don't have a Darwinian view of evolution. It's hard to know what natural selection is and what it's characterized by, but I think the progression towards successful environmental integration comes from a fundamental substrate of mental orientation, and that has a qualitative aspect of it that is not explained by simple material viewpoints. Okay, so that's all I'm arguing. It's just like I'm trying to consider everything here. You know, like truly, I am. You know, uh, I'm trying to look for a theological rationalization and a rational rationalization and a scientific explanation, as well as a metaphysical explanation, which kind of goes along with theology, but I think is different. It's metaphysical, something beyond what we know physical processes to entail, but could lead towards. And I guess, really, you can think about it as kind of Jacob's ladder, but I'm going to add a couple aspects to it. So think about Jacob's ladder, right? And these stairs, there's an infinite amount of stairs. You can keep going up and up and up forever. Now, as you go up the stairs, your experience becomes more meaningful each time you take another step. But the tendency is to look behind you and see how far you've come and to stay there and to appreciate the view because you've done good enough. Maybe you have. Maybe you've done pretty good. But meaningful experience is going to deteriorate in that manner. And you're going to end up becoming egocentric. Because humility is not in thinking less of yourself, but in thinking less about yourself, right? That's what characterizes humility. And you can be one of the best, most talented, smartest, best looking people to ever exist. And you can still be very humble while being objective. It's just thinking less about those things. It doesn't matter to you. I think in the same way that, you know, thinking less of yourself is equally as egocentric as thinking really well about yourself, and just having it's on the same spectrum of an egocentric worldview. It's like I'm terrible or I'm the best. Both of those are equally as bad. Stop thinking about just yourself and start thinking about what characterizes your experience and the options in front of you and allowing that innate curiosity to manifest so that you can pursue the things that will create experience that is worthy of what it means to live and to survive. The best possible outcome is characterized by how much suffering you go through. And that, you got to listen to those words very carefully. Go through. You have to go through it. You don't stay in the suffering. There is a light at the end of the tunnel, but it's something you take for yourself. And what you are is more than just your sense of self. You're something far deeper and far more fundamental than just your egocentric illusion of self, because your self is an illusion. Your conscious experience, however, is not, because consciousness is far more fundamental. Because, and I think we know that due to psychedelic trips, where people have, it's an ego death. It's the loss of what you are and your episodic memories and the simple understanding of existence itself, which is kind of why I want to try psychedelics, because it's like, what? That sounds awesome. I want to experience that. If I ever do, I'll let you guys know how it goes. I would love to go to Brazil and do an ayahuasca trip, if I'm being honest. It sounds absolutely miserable and vile, personally, to me, but just for research, right? Just for the research. It sounds totally useful because, as I'm going into neuroscience and different things of the nature, I'm very inclined to learn about, the different altered states of consciousness and the effects of the brain. I'd love to do some like neuroimaging and, some scans of the brain on psychedelics. And I'm sure there have been stuff like that before. And I should probably research it, but it sounds incredible. I guess you have to find what creates a good experience here and now and allowing you to go through the suffering. Because I promise you that if you don't go through suffering, your self growth is going to be learning how to run away from yourself as best as possible. Okay? Self growth is characterized by pain. It really is. And I want to express why that is not a bad thing. That is a good, very good thing to go through pain. Because what's on the other side is meaningful experience. And, I'm not saying, torture yourself. That's not what I'm saying at all. It's more so of an intense level of uncomfortability or discomfort. And that is what really characterizes the suffering. And then, you know, as you pursue life more and more, the more suffering will come. But you will experience the intense suffering At some point in your life, you're going to experience it. And so, do you want life to characterize that for you, or do you want to choose it for yourself? Because when you choose it for yourself, you grow and you understand things better and you become stronger. And the stronger you become, the more positive your experience will be. That's why it is good to be offended. Take the chance and allow yourself to be wrong, to consider being wrong. And that is a very negative experience, by the way. Like it truly is. But it's a good negative experience that I think everyone should put themselves through. It's a good idea. I promise. It really is. So I beg you to consider that. Anyways, this video is going to be over. It's Sunday evening, so I think I'm going to rest a little bit. Maybe even watch some TV. Haven't done that in a while. So it's going to be a good time. Anyways, know nothing, consider everything, especially what I have to say. Just kidding. See y'all later.